He's a phantom. Danny Phantom. He's gonna catch 'em all 'cause he's Danny Phantom. He's gonna catch 'em all 'cause he's Danny Phantom. He's gonna catch 'em all 'cause he's Danny Phantom.
Danny Phantom is one of the most recognizable Nicktoons, period. Widely considered to be the best of the Hartman 4, Danny Phantom serves as one of Nickelodeon's most successful action cartoons. Being of a ghost action slice-of-life comedy hybrid, it carved out a cult following that to this day wants to know what happened. Well, we're not there yet. 2004. Nickelodeon would be there. Normal. Nicktoons would have been off the ground as its own channel. Nick Jr. wasn't a thing yet, with Moose and Z running Noggin. Nick at Night, while not new, would have split up with Nickelodeon, at least in ratings reports, which provided a huge controversy with cable executives at the time. Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Wild Thornberrys, and Rocket Power would have their final years, while Drake and Josh, Ned's the Classified, and Unfabulous would have their start. Nickelodeon would release the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour in May. Speaking of, the Fairly OddParents would go on to release Channel Chasers, their second movie after Abracatastrophe. So as far as 2004 goes, it has your pretty much regular events, nothing rocking the boat or signaling a new era just yet.
Butch Hartman would have been deep into the success of Fairly OddParents, his biggest success on the network to date. Fairly OddParents would be a huge hit, second to SpongeBob. However, sometimes it would surpass SpongeBob in the ratings. Due to the success and allegedly figuring out that Nickelodeon was looking for a boys animated action show, Butch started working on the beginnings of Danny Phantom. So at this time, Nickelodeon really wouldn't have that many action shows. Now, in retrospect, while Danny Phantom is likely remembered to be mainly an action show, there are some levels of comedy, slice of life, sci-fi, and a teeny bit of drama and romance.
The only action show I could really count if I stretched the definition of significantly would be My Life as a Teenage Robot, which would have come out slightly earlier. There would have been a possibility of another show, Constant Pain. However, that got shelved for behind the scenes matter, so it doesn't really count as a Nicktoon in Nickelodeon's eyes. Action, at least to the standard we are putting Danny Phantom on, would be a novel concept to a Nickelodeon audience. So what is Danny Phantom all about? If you haven't seen the show before, Danny Phantom is a show about a young boy accidentally gaining ghost powers and using them to fight evil. He keeps this a secret from his family, as most superheroes do, and he balances his ghost superhero responsibilities with his slightly less normal teenage life. So now that you have sort of a picture of what Danny Phantom is and what it would be, let's dive into its first episode, Mystery Meat, and give you a better picture. So the episode starts off with Jack Fenton, Danny's father, giving Danny and his friends a look at his latest new inventions. The episode does something clever being the first episode. Even though later on within the episode we would end up seeing ghosts, you don't see Danny Fenton turn into Danny Phantom, two totally different people, at least at this point. They actually build up anticipation for you to see the first viewing of him.
So Danny, you and your little friends want to hunt ghosts.
Actually, Dad, I want to be an astronaut.
I want to center in on a few things. Later on in this episode, being a 22-minute special, we see that the other conflict, other than the normal Danny fighting a ghost conflict, is a difference of opinion between Sam and Tucker, Danny's best friends, on meat versus vegetables.
Parents don't listen. Even worse, they don't understand. Why can't they accept me for who I am?
If you don't know, you can probably tell off of Sam's response that she's not like other girls. However, this Sam is a dead ringer for many of Butch Hartman's characters going into the late 2000s and early 2010s. They'd wear their personality on their sleeves, and everything they say speaks towards their main character trait. It seems like something off of Total Drama, but even Gwen didn't start out like that. I'll put it to you this way. Tucker is into gadgets and geek stuff, but you don't really hear about it in this episode. You know, the episode that's supposed to introduce you to his character, but luckily Sam would improve. For now.
You may have also seen that in this episode, Danny doesn't have the greatest confidence or control of his powers. Although a common trope when it comes to recently gaining powers, it was handled here and introduces easy continuity to the show, wanting to see Danny get better with his powers and learn new ones. Since the episode starts out after Danny gets his powers, we are now thrusted into the timeline around the part where he doesn't know if he should tell his parents or not.
Meat heightens the senses, and my all-meat streak is 14 years strong.
And it's about to end.
We get our first fight. In any other episode, this fight would have been pretty underwhelming. You see, Danny is not adjusted to his powers, nor his stance on ghosts that haunt Amity Park, nor fighting in general and having the confidence to put up a good fight. So while not a true testament of his powers, it works here because he's learning. We also get a really good shot of Danny going ghost for the first time. Putting the fight aside, let's talk about music composition. While Fairly OddParents went down a route that leaned more towards jazz, Danny Phantom went down a route that leaned more towards funk. You'll notice pretty neat bass lines under almost drum and bass style drum patterns, often layered over an electric guitar. Even for slower moments, using brass, most likely playing a lower note to give the scene this sense of dread but almost legitimacy. Then there's the use of electronic piano that you may hear, especially during the school scenes, or any scene that needs to be felt in a lighter tone. Even though Guy Moon would work on both Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom, you couldn't confuse one of the soundtracks for either show. The show also uses Ethereum, which gives it that spooky sci-fi vibe. Theremin? This show also uses Ethereum. I'm hoping I said that right. I love that Danny Phantom has a very distinguished sound, which helps it making it not seem like a sci-fi Fairly OddParents.
Because clearly all principal offices have cameras that only show their meat lockers, they find Sam quickly. It leads into another fight that has pretty good action. However, it is here where the episode sort of goes off a cliff. You see, the last bit of this episode deals with the fight I was telling you about. Literally, their argument starts because of a joke that Tucker makes in jest. It causes Sam to react pretty irrationally, and it starts to protest, making opposite messages of each other, and I'd be more forgiving if we got a decent payoff. Oh, and speaking of, let me show you the payoff.
Guys, time to make up. Now!
No talking about the problem, no understanding why Sam would blow up at Tucker over a joke, no apologies from Tucker for throwing Sam under the bus, just a hug, and them looking envious at each other.
So we get the third fight, which is better than the first and the second fight because it tackles three things very well. Firstly, it ends with the Jasmine crusade against her parents for this episode, because both her and her parents are now fully aware that ghosts exist in this episode and they are not chasing them down for no reason. Secondly, we get to see Danny being much more confident in himself now than before. You may have noticed that in the first fight, Danny was avoiding attacks and saving his friends, while stumbling through trying to mend the situation. Now, he's taking on even the minions that are sent his way. Lastly, and more importantly, we see that Danny really isn't that strong, and rather than defeating the villain, he captures him.
He ends up saving the day, for now. And again, with no payoff from Sam and Tucker's debacle, they just end up cleaning up the school from the mess they all collectively made. Did Danny Phantom start off well? Not really. It was a great attempt, but it was botched in many areas. It seems super rough, and the way that Sam and Tucker were brute forced into fighting is very uncomfortable. However, things will pick up from here, so let's talk about the rise. Seeing Danny Phantom as just an action show would be heavily misleading. Although there's action all throughout the series, there is an underlying layer of relationships being changed dynamically. When the ghosts are away, Danny Phantom is Danny Fenton, a 14-year-old boy who attends a regular school with regular people. He balances having a social life with trying to figure out where his life is going to go.
Danny Phantom was never shy about tackling real-world problems. But this show took it a step further by allowing the problems to affect the characters realistically and not shy away from the ugly truth. Take the episode Beauty Marked, for example. Early on in that episode, we're met with this quote.
You girls are unique individuals with strong opinions and independent minds.
You're darn right we are.
It's my job to make you forget that and mold you into happy little princesses.
Many cartoons have dealt with different levels of peer pressure before, but this episode is a direct commentary on gender standards nearly a decade before the infamous social justice warrior movement that's developed thanks to the connection society has made through the internet culture. This episode handles the topic perfectly without going overboard. It doesn't feel like I'm just getting preached to. And if you view this episode casually, it can be easy to miss. Dora Mattingly is from a part of the ghost zone that is literally frozen in the Dark Ages. And let's just say their political views on equal rights were extremely dated. Dora infiltrates Casper High's beauty pageant in search of a bride for her brother. With reluctance, Sam joins the pageant and wins, lining her up to wear her ghostly tiara that binds her and the prince forever. The prince plotline and the pageant plotline opens up a lot of opportunity to commentate on the realistic effects that these conflicts have on teenagers. Since Danny is chosen to be the pageant judge, the first half of the episode is just Danny and Tucker exploiting his temporary authority to hook up with his female classmates.
Dating her Friday, dating her Saturday, dating her Sunday. Once, twice, shoot! Ha! Dating her Sunday.
This is played for laughs, but watching it in today's social climate makes it almost come off a bit insensitive. Especially when Dash literally flips out on him just because Danny is, quote, hogging all the hotties. From the viewer's standpoint, it's easy to see that both Dash and Danny's respect for these girls are a bit one-dimensional, and the girls seem like they should have a problem with it. Until it's revealed that these girls are just as swooned by the idea of the contest as Danny is, completely dedicating their entire lifestyle to winning the pageant. Kissing up to whoever had more power over you is a very common behavior, but many overlook the effects of losing a sense of identity when you completely mold yourself to be somebody to act as a tool to get what you want, rather than holding on to your natural desires and expressing your inner sense of self. When Sam visits Dora in Prince Argon's castle, they see the effects of a world unable to move on from previously constructed social molds. Sam gets out of the marriage simply by being herself. Someone who doesn't allow her identity to be lost in the constant sea of judgment known as high school. Also, the fight scenes in this episode are pretty stellar.
We wouldn't be able to get through our dissection of Danny Phantom without talking about the action, and more importantly, the villains. I'd like to dedicate a future video to talking about all the villains in detail, because a video like that would take up the amount of minutes as a Rise and Fall, maybe even more. But let's highlight some of my favorites.
This is ridiculous. I could have skinned them both by now.
Skulker is one of the main antagonists of Danny Phantom, being called the quote, Ghost Zone's greatest hunter. What I like about his character is that it's straightforward in the way it works as an antagonist. You see him and you deduce that he's evil pretty quick. And a ghost hunter just seems like an interesting concept. They vary things up nicely by having episodes like Life Lessons, in which Skulker plays around with the concept of torturing his enemies in unconventional ways, such as holding something that they find valuable against them. In that episode, he would handcuff Danny and his then enemy Valerie, who has no idea that Danny Phantom is really Danny Fenton. It was Skulker's plan there that made it an entertaining episode. However, there'd be times when they team up, Danny and Skulker, such as in Prisoners of Love, in which, despite being stable enemies at this point, they band together to defeat a common foe, Walker. However, not every enemy wants to take out Danny specifically. Some want other goals. It's just that Danny gets in the way. Ember McLean had a pretty simple plan: to take over the world. More specifically, to take over the world with her hypnotic pop song. One of my favorite episodes, Fanning the Flames, has Danny take on Ember for the first time, giving us this song. Her character design is really cool, with her powers through her guitar being a very neat way to differentiate her action scenes. We'd see her a few times, including Pirate Radio, where a similar plan takes place. She's used to make a hypnotic song to have the adults of Amity Park power a flying ghost ship. Even though she wasn't the main villain here, her role as a mercenary was well done. Even of the villains who Danny got in the way of, they aren't all human. Enter Valerie.
Don't know who you are, Vlad, but if this thing does what I think it does, I can't say that I can.
Valerie Gray, a popular student turned vengeful ghost hunter. Obviously, she wasn't always a villain. Everything changed with the episode Shades of Grey, where an out-of-control dog caused Valerie's father to be out of a job. This led into Valerie blaming her now poorer and less popular life on ghosts, including Danny Phantom. Unbeknownst to her, she gains ghost hunting equipment by indirect manipulation from Vlad. Danny, both in human and ghost form, would butt heads often with Valerie, again going back to episodes like Life Lessons. Going into season 2, she seemed to develop a friendship and crush on Danny Fenton, with episodes like Rainstorm and Flirting with Disaster. In these, the intermingling of their relationship does so at the jealousy of Sam. It created a very great dynamic for her character, considering that she's human. However, if we're gonna talk about great villains in Danny Phantom, we'd have to turn to Vlad.
Like every good superhero, Danny has an arch nemesis with similar abilities to him, in the form of his father's college lab partner, Vlad Masters, or Vlad Plasmiest when in his ghost form. Vlad and Danny's relationship bring out the most conflict with Danny, as they both seem to care about each other on some level and have easily teamed up and worked together effectively when the situation calls for it. They both know each other's secret identity and have agreed not to tell anybody, because if one person spills, the other will too. This leads to Vlad and Danny having to cover each other around other people, including Jack and Maddie. giving Vlad and Danny a more personal relationship outside of being enemies. Jack also still sees Vlad as one of his closest friends, so their lives are constantly intertwining, even when Vlad isn't the main villain of the episode. It's always nice to see when a series is able to treat their villains as actual characters and allow them to have moments to justify who they are, rather than being some generic bad guy of the week. Ever since his accident, the number one thing Vlad feels Jack has robbed of him by giving him his ectoacne was having a family of his own. More specifically, a family with Maddie. Vlad has offered to Danny on many accounts to join him in his endeavors, as he believes he could be a much better father than Jack. The desire to have Jack's life has been Vlad's biggest weakness, and Danny has used this against Vlad to exploit his feelings, and turn their altercations over into his favor.
We both talked about it last night, and I want to stay here with you too.
Really?
Yes, I do. Come on, give me a big hug, new dad.
Ah! You little rat! You tricked me!
This vulnerability is really what drives Vlad as a person. Everything he has ever done has been to try to create a successful life since he was robbed of one in his youth. He became a billionaire, created an advanced technology development company, Vladco, and he even becomes the mayor of Amity Park in season 3. But we'll get to that. But then we get moments like Vlad taking in Danny after he loses his friends and family, no questions asked, and even agrees to try to help him ease Danny's pain. This, of course, all takes place in an alternate timeline. But in that timeline, we see that Vlad has had time to reflect on his actions, and even regrets a lot of them. And when a second opportunity to double-cross Danny comes, when young Danny visits old Vlad in the future Ghost Zone, Vlad doesn't. Vlad is a lot more crazy than he is actually evil. His twisted views on life has corrupted his sense of morality, but at the same time feeds his motivation to obtain power, making him an expert at using his ghost powers.
What makes Danny Phantom separate from other shows at the time is sort of the secret sauce Butch put on the other show that he made as well. Danny hides his identity and powers to his ghost hunting parents. You can argue it's a bigger risk here because unlike Fairly Odd Parents, Danny lives under constant watch, where one slip and someone may know. No episode comes close to talking about identity as much as The Ultimate Enemy, so let's dissect this one in detail.
The Ultimate Enemy is nothing short of a big deal when talking about Danny Phantom. It is probably the first episode. No, it's the first thing you think of when people bring up Danny Phantom. This hour-long special is universally accepted as the peak of the show's writing, quality, and overall story. The Ultimate Enemy definitely has its fair share of problems, as any episode may, but the impact it had on the show's reputation is unmatched as it played a key role in both the rise and fall of the show. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's back up a bit. The Ultimate Enemy first premiered on September 16th, 2005. We open to a glimpse into the future of Amity Park. As we follow a fast-paced scene with the future Valerie on a hoverboard, it's hard not to see the parallels between this episode and another episode that acts as a staple to its own respective franchise, The Fairly Odd Parents, Channel Chasers. The dark future cold opening, a time loop involving the main character's future self, and everything gets reset at the end of the episode as if nothing changed. Danny Phantom uses a lot of similar set of tropes, just as much as Fairly Odd Parents, throughout each of the show's run.
Hello, Valerie. And goodbye.
Now do you understand?
No, that logo isn't there on accident. That is Danny Phantom. The same ghost that protected Amity Park is the person who wound up destroying it in the future. So, Kuro, who's Dark Danny?
A series of butterfly effects in this episode leads to Danny's entire family, friends, and Mr. Lancer to die in an explosion, and this isn't played lightly either. Aside from Avatar: The Last Airbender, Danny Phantom is the only Nickelodeon show to my knowledge that has death played out straightforward, instead of being subtly hinted at or just played for laughs.
Take that, you zombie!
I'll take it from here. Die, zombie!
Good police work, Officer Nancy.
With no one left, Danny turns to Vlad as his new guardian. He pleads to Vlad to somehow end the pain he feels over the loss of his family, prompting Vlad to, quote, rip out his humanity. Now, I can't say that really makes much sense to me, even by how the show lore works, but what ends up happening leads to the creation of Dark Danny. Vlad ends up ripping out Danny's ghost half, which then overpowers Vlad using his gauntlets and rips the ghost half out of him too. The two ghost halves merge, transforming into an entirely new entity. This being is no longer Danny or Vlad anymore. He's a living embodiment of power and rage.
Connecting the teenage aspect from earlier, the episode revolves around this career aptitude test, or CAT. The episode leaves clues for you to figure out some associations. So earlier when Valerie was running home, she stopped in front of a Nasty Burger. Later in the episode, a worker from Nasty Burger is shown as the person not to be, as he scored the lowest on the CAT. With Jasmine being on the other end of the spectrum scoring highly, and being Danny's older sister, you can kind of see where the tension goes within this episode. I do find some parts a bit confusing, however. I do understand that Sam is morally righteous sometimes, and Tucker is a bit of a nerd. However, they simultaneously try to play both ends of an issue here. You see, in a fight with the future offspring of the Box Ghost and Lunch Lady.
That was Box Lunch? The daughter of the Box Ghost and the Lunch Lady.
Yikes.
Actually, it's more of an ew.
Yeah, we know about that. He gains the answers to the CAT, which was orchestrated by Clockwork. This is to ensure that Danny cheats on the CAT, which leads into a series of events, with Danny turning evil and then turning to Vlad over an explosion at the Nasty Burger, seeing as he has no one left to turn to that understands him. The issue is, it is Clockwork's adjustments that leads to this. How do you adjust something that has already happened? The future Danny, or Dark Danny Phantom, ends up doing this. But how can your evil self be the reason why you turn evil, if you need that event to happen to turn evil, so that you can turn yourself evil? That makes no sense.
Dark Danny surely does deserve the title of Danny's ultimate enemy. While Skulker may have had the most quarrels, Vlad had the most motivation, and the Ghost Gang the most powerful, Dark Danny represented everything Danny had to lose. He was born from the loss of his loved ones, and blames himself, believing that his selfish actions had brought them together to the place of their demise. Had Danny not allowed himself to feel entitled to a little bad behavior since he spent all year being good, none of this would have ever happened. Okay, it sounds a bit ridiculous that just because Danny cheated on a test that in 10 years he will become evil and enslave the human race, but I actually really like how this episode plays out, as it doesn't really try to excuse it either. In fact, that's the whole point of the episode.
We do get our final fight with Danny's future self. Obviously, his future self is more powerful, which means he has to play a different game. His future self has quite a bit of quotes here, some I had to truly think about.
What are you gonna do? Waste me? What happens to you then?
You don't get it, do ya?
I'm still here. I still exist.
That means you still turn into me.
His game is not about destroying Danny, but just letting the time run out until his folks are gone. It's inevitable that the only person who would understand him at this point is Vlad, which leads into, well, Dark Danny. As much as I enjoyed the fight, the payoff is truly something of beauty. While Danny himself couldn't save the people he loved the most, and Mr. Lancer from blowing up, Clockwork ends up showing Danny that all of this can be changed, so long as Danny doesn't cheat, and lead everyone he cares about to the Nasty Burger that's going to explode. I will be honest though, sometimes when rewatching this, it's kind of hard to see Clockwork's plan until you see the end, which should speak volumes about his character. However, through killing the villain and learning to take the test the right way, none of that comes close to Jasmine and Danny being both aware that she knows Danny's powers.
So, how long have you known?
Since the Spectra thing, I didn't want to tell you till you wanted to tell me. It's your secret.
Well, it's our secret now.
The Ultimate Enemy is a special that stuck with me ever since I first saw it, because it makes you think about the little things that you do to cope with the pressure of being a good person. This episode shows you just how easy it is to think that a little evil here and there isn't harmful as long as you do good things to make up for it, and the smallest mistake can have devastating effects on your future.
So with action, drama, romance, and the struggle of keeping an identity hidden, what can take down such a promising series? Well, let's talk about The Fall. The Fall of Danny Phantom is one that caught a lot of people by surprise. The show's popularity was set at an all-time high, and with the positive response from the Ultimate Enemy, this show was set up to be a long-running success and solidify itself as one of Nickelodeon's top airing cartoons of all time. And then the opposite happens.
I can't say that the researching process for this topic was easy, as I've spent the past 2 years or so looking into this topic and gathering any evidence that I can find all over the web. A lot of what's known about the fall can only be pieced together from information leaking here and there, cast and crew interviews, and a few online forums that are only accessible from surviving screenshots and selected use of the Wayback Machine. This little journey we're about to take involves a lot of jumping back and forth between chronological events, and a little bit of speculation to fill in the missing gaps between confirmed key events that play out. All of my sources will be in the description.
The best place to start would be the earliest valid source, when Danny's cancellation was first announced, which is actually from Butch Hartman himself. Back during the show's run in the mid-2000s, Butch Hartman hosted forums on his now defunct website, which not only gave a place for the fans to converse, speculate, and share fan art and stories, but also allowed Hartman to have a direct connection to his fans, and often made posts talking directly to the fans himself, a behavior many modern-day Hart fans would probably appreciate today. It's in these forums that we find a very lengthy, 8-paragraph long post where he first announces that both the Fairly OddParents and Danny Phantom would be coming to an end. Now we know that this didn't really end up being the case for Fairly OddParents.
A video I had animated for Butch's channel outlines that Fairly OddParents would be cancelled a whopping 4 times before finally getting the boot after Chloe's season, but Danny Phantom would play out a different way. In the forum post, Hartman had expressed being content with Fairly OddParents ending, but showed clear resentment to the idea of Danny Phantom following the same fate. He bartered that Danny Phantom still had a lot of potential, and he had more ideas that he wanted to see utilized in the show. And while he claims to have no ill will towards Nickelodeon or the decisions to end the show, he then makes a passive remark about how fans should make an effort to create a revival movement. Now here's the fun part. If you guys want to see more Danny or Fairly OddParents, please don't tell me. I already know you do. I suggest you tell Nickelodeon. I don't know if it'll change anyone's mind, but let them know how you feel. I'm not even remotely implying that anyone come off as rude, vulgar, or insulting, so if those are your plans, please refrain from saying anything at all. We don't want that kind of help. But a few words from some devoted fans may stir up something. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just thrilled to have made 2 awesome classic animated TV shows. I can only pray all of you get to do something as fun and creative as this one someday. God has been so good to me thus far, and he's sure not going to stop now. His post says that the reason Nickelodeon canceled the show was because they felt it was naturally at the end of its run. But that seems a bit contradictory. If we look at the beginning of the message, the entire first paragraph was dedicated to trying to convince you that he's telling the truth. It's worded very excessively, as if he was trying to overcompensate for something and get ahead of a potential contradictory reasoning. Besides, why would we have any reason to suspect he's lying in the first place? It just seems a bit odd to go to such great lengths to start your announcement this way.
You see, Danny Phantom was cancelled halfway through its 2nd season, even though we know it not only got to finish its 2nd season, but got an entire 3rd season as well. The show was cancelled just as episode 39 had aired, leaving 19 episodes left to produce and air. If we start revisiting some surviving fan forums and other sites, we start to see repeating claims of the show suffering from budgeting issues. Nickelodeon recognized the potential of Danny Phantom early on, and agreed to sign a 2-year contract outlining how the series will produce future episodes. This contract guarantees a future for Danny Phantom for a period of time, and perhaps this confidence led to its own downfall. A series of ambitious decisions allegedly began hacking away at the relationship between Nickelodeon and Butch Hartman. The series switched from a form of animation that costs twice as much. Voice actors were hired without Nickelodeon's consent, and the production budget set for the first 1-hour special, Rainstorm, was overspent by $20,000.
When The Ultimate Enemy rolled around, Hartman had requested $2 million from Nickelodeon for marketing purposes. This was agreed to on the grounds that the special would earn at least $5 million profit from the Burger King promotional toy line and the Game Boy Advance tie-in video game. But after royalties were paid back to Burger King and THQ, the game's development company, Hartman had only made $50,000 profit, a mere 1% of what was agreed upon. From this point forward, Nickelodeon had branded Danny Phantom as a complete marketing failure. Nickelodeon would then only agree to promote Danny Phantom if Hartman could find merchandise funding himself. Keep that statement in mind for later.
However, as Hartman tried to approach different companies to invest in his show, the bad reputation of Danny Phantom's marketing overwhelmed his efforts. Due to the 2-year contract, Nickelodeon couldn't just cancel the show outright, so they agreed to let Hartman produce season 3, but nothing more than that.
All of these events would have taken place shortly after The Ultimate Enemy had aired, which was September 16th, 2005. Hartman's forum post confirmed that the cancellation happened just as episode 39 had aired, which was January 13th, 2006, lining these allegations up perfectly to what Hartman has stated. His plea to the fans to revive the show was his last resort. He had no longer a sway over Nickelodeon, but he did have a sway over his Hart fans, and his personal message boards were the perfect ammunition.
According to some of these forums, there were protests formed. You can see some of the documentation floating around if you know where to dig. Despite their best efforts for multiple years, Viacom/Nickelodeon didn't budge. With season 3 still locked into Nickelodeon's production schedule, we visit the final nail in the coffin that sealed Danny Phantom's fate. Butch Hartman is undoubtedly the creator of Danny Phantom, but a lot of the fandom has come to agree that it was Steve Marmol, being the person who was the true backbone of the show. As a frequent collaborator with Hartman on projects such as Jomini Bravo, I Am Weasel, and The Fairly OddParents, Marmol had a way of taking Butch's ideas and balancing them out to strengthen and improve them, to have charm and grace. He had a strong influence over the first 2 seasons, and with many writing credits that include The Ultimate Enemy, the series-defining episode. It was stated that Marmol had a lot of his own personal plans for season 3, and a few were deemed too dark for Hartman's liking.
Another common rumor was that Marmol wanted to make Danny Phantom a darker show, and Hartman was extremely against the idea and had him fired. This was one of the more extreme allegations, but when digging deeper, we can find some evidence of truth to this. In a reported interview, Marmol confirmed that he did in fact have a very different idea for season 3. Executive meddling was at play, supporting the idea that Marmol wanted to do things darker. He still wanted to do the 3rd season, but, quote, something prevented him from doing so. He then left the show shortly after, and he has stated that he wishes to remain silent on what his original ideas were, out of respect for the people who had worked on what actually did get made. I came across a few posts about a user named Fire Fury, who planned on a revival project based on Marmol's season 3, but never came to be. But this is also evidence that there are people out there who know about what Marmol had planned, further confirming the allegation. We can trust that Marmol exited the show after his vision for season 3 was rejected, but whether or not he was fired or left on his own terms is not established.
Thus, season 3 was made without Marmol's guiding hand on the wheel, and the quality of the show had significantly changed. Whether or not you agree that the show had gotten worse, and if you really want to make it a hot take better, it is undeniable that the series had a different tone and approach to the episodes.
Characters suffered from flanderization, such as taking the complicated relationship between Danny and Vlad, and turning Vlad into a Saturday morning cartoon villain who had baseless motivations and nonsensical character traits. The first 2 seasons were noticeably a lot more open with the concept of death, but the 3rd season leans more towards Hartman's recent proclamations about the ghosts actually being monsters from another dimension, despite many episodes contradicting this. The premise of Danny being an average high schooler balancing a life as a teenage superhero is replaced by Monster of the Week tropes and a dial back of all of the characters' intelligence, even Danny's. Hartman's eccentric humor is cranked up to 11 in these episodes, making it feel more like the later seasons of Fairly OddParents. The show still had some great moments and introduced us to an immediate fan favorite character, Danielle, but the declining quality was strong all the way until the end.
Hold up. To put a pin in what we're talking about, you may have noticed that up to this point, we didn't really mention Danielle, or Danny Phantom, with an I, which is a highly received character, and, well, there's a reason for that. If I were to describe this character, it'd be unfortunate. She had a lot of potential, however at most, all we can talk about are ifs, whats, and maybes. While she initially would be on the side of Vlad in the episode Kindred Spirits, until she figured out his true plan, she'd be against him from that point on. Now while we'd have one episode, such as Destabilized that played with the idea of her instability, and her trust with Danny alongside Valerie's dynamic with Danny, that's just one episode. To have such a well-crafted character just handed to you with amazing fan reception, to only use her twice, and then with a cameo in the finale, that's actually highway robbery in my opinion. I suppose she could be used for fan fiction purposes, but it's incredible how many other characters get multiple appearances. But Danny gets 2? But speaking of the finale, with the marketing failure that was The Ultimate Enemy, Marmel's departure from the series, and the support of Nickelodeon lost, Danny Phantom ends with one final hour-long special, Phantom Planet.
Phantom Planet is the 4th hour-long special of the series and is the final episode of Danny Phantom's 3-season run. This episode throws a lot of ideas at you that you should come to expect from a series finale. Big revelations, a plot twist, and a conflict presented on a grander scale than anything else. But none of it really seems blended together that well. The whole special just seems like taking a bunch of ideas that seem cool in theory and try to make them flow into each other, but none of these concepts are developed and work with one another.
The high-tech look is my bit.
These are Master's Blasters. Really cool looking, well-trained ghost hunters who beat Danny at his own game, each and every time. It probably doesn't help that Danny at this point doesn't do well at ghost hunting, introducing a pretty awkward rule of 3 joke about his jumpsuit being shredded, even in situations where he's been in this exact same predicament and his attire was still intact. What I enjoy about this special so far is that it makes no qualms about what Vlad wishes to do here. By pushing out Danny Phantom, that just makes his evil doings that much easier to do. Considering that Vlad is a public figure, it also ties into his politics. You see, in the 3rd season, he was elected mayor. Something that superheroes often need is public support. Even though Danny does his duties for the greater good, imagine saving a city that hates you. So this dynamic of Danny battling public support with the Vlad Masters / Plasmius as mayor, it has potential. This leads into a pretty dramatic scene of Danny going unghost. That's right, not going ghost. His friends and older sister are understandably upset. However, it's clear that they handicap Danny into not being able to reason his way out of this any more than, hey guys, think about what this will do for me. And the reason I don't accept that as a proper reason is because we all know that's not how Danny got here. He got here because he didn't feel needed anymore. After Master's Blasters took all of his purpose to be a ghost hunter, he didn't get there because he wanted to be normal. And what's super dumb about all of this is if you felt like Danny losing his powers meant that now you're living on the sidelines, you were living on the sidelines then, just as Danny's sidekick. Now you're just living on the sidelines in a normal life. You kind of see what I mean about these arguments not working?
Once the Master's Blasters serve their purpose in the story and push Danny to give up being a hero, they're practically irrelevant for everything that happens forward, and we never find out what happens to them. The idea of Vlad having a redemption arc is teased but unfulfilled, and happens when he's carrying out his latest mustache-twirling plot to become ruler of the Earth.
Getting back to the episode, a giant meteor is coming towards Earth, and this is what causes Danny to want to help out. After Mayor Vlad purposely made Jack blow up the wrong rock, he uses this as an opportunity to hold the world ransom, as he makes the comment intangible. While that's a great twist for a villain, adding $50 billion kind of seems like a really small thing next to complete world control. You'd think for someone who's already a millionaire, he'd understand that one thing clearly outweighs the other. It sounds nice, trust me, $50 billion sounds nice, but it's not exactly making sense with the plot. And it doesn't matter anyway because Vlad can't even stop the comet, which leads into Danny going ghost again to save the world. And it kind of puts a dent in the whole selfish sort of aura that they've put on him. So I'm not sure how or why, but he gets blasted by ghosts while in the ghost zone, and that leads into him having powers. Again, I guess you can say his DNA was sparked because there was still a way to become ghosts if given the right blast? I don't know.
By the time we see Jack and Maddie find out Danny's secret, the concept is so exhausted because it already happened a few times before in the series, but was reversed. And to pull the same trick enough times that we get sick of it in a show that's only 3 seasons long really says something about the execution. Just like people finding out Timmy's secret in The Fairly OddParents. We can only pretend to care about it so many times until it gets inevitably reversed by the next episode. Granted, people find out Danny's secret permanently in this episode, but it happens at the very end and after all the conflict is resolved. And there's not enough time left in the episode to really explore people's reaction to this. Jack has literally tried to execute his own son with an arsenal of dangerous supernatural weapons for the past 1.5 years, and absolutely nothing comes of this.
However, now everyone knows his secret. It's actually a beautifully composed scene. Too bad it has a lot of trash before it and after it. Giving $50 billion, having a statue go up in the capital of every country, having his ghost powers be zapped back into him as if no one in the entire series has been zapped, and having Skulker not just capture Danny right then and there. Yeah, this is a fan fiction. Someone's writing influence seeped into this and made it worse, and considering the departure of one half of the baby that is Danny Phantom, I can only assume Butch. It seems a little too fanfare-y and self-serving for a show that really didn't do much of that. Speaking of service, the show also gives fan service by making Sam and Danny become a thing. I don't care. It may be a hot take, but the episode didn't build this up for me. Sure, if they work, have a blast. That doesn't mean I should handwave all the problems here and cheer them on. Anyway, it ends with them being together, saving the world as Danny Phantom / Danny Fenton, and that's how all of this ends.
Phantom Planet was a finale that tied up the show's main plot points out of obligation, and ignores all of the side plots it had built because it favored telling a story that nobody asked for. How is Valerie's ghost hunting career going to turn out? What was the Fright Knight's deal with Vlad Plasmius? Where does Danielle live now? Did Dark Danny escape Clockwork's tower? What will become of the Far Frozen now that Danny has saved the Ghost Zone a second time along with the entire Earth? What's that? We're going to ignore all of this in favor for an asteroid plotline nobody asked for? Well, perhaps this series was trying to go ghost again in more ways than one.
The love for Danny Phantom has been going strong, even until this day. The direct protesting has died down. New efforts are made, with the diligence to sway Nickelodeon into giving the show a second chance, that other franchises such as Hey Arnold, Rocko's Modern Life, and Invader Zim have recently received. Hartman's first major project after Danny Phantom was Tough Puppy, a series seemingly opposite to Danny Phantom in every way. It focused on talking animals rather than humans, was more comedy based in action, was written in 11-minute segments instead of 22, and was geared towards a younger audience. However, Hartman had still had his eyes set on a Danny Phantom revival, and would target Danny Phantom fans to support Tough Puppy, with the idea being that if that show had good ratings, it would bring back Danny Phantom.
This could have easily been done just to help boost Tough Puppy's ratings, and what he's claiming really isn't how television series work. If that was true, Danny Phantom would have been revived when The Fairly OddParents was revived the last 2 times, because that show was brought back by the good ratings. But Hartman wouldn't stop there. There would be constant vague teases about a potential revival, ranging between cryptic answers when questioned about the show, and random posts about a live-action film. Still, with no results, Hartman brought his escapades to YouTube, creating videos that would elaborate on the Danny Phantom lore. These videos had mixed reviews as it further contradicted established lore in the Danny Phantom universe, and made random claims about the show's production.
Did you say it's yo Danny Fenton, he was just 14? Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14, so the word is young, not yo.
It's really not, though.
Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14. Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14. Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14.
Hartman would end up finding success with his 10 years later videos. These videos would depict Danny along with his friends, family, and enemies in Hartman's modern digital style, and aged up 10 years to showcase future scenarios and advancements. Some Danny Phantom content is even being produced by Nickelodeon in small doses, perhaps to test the waters and gauge if there's any true fan interest. A few special Danny Phantom figures and merchandise have been re-released. There was also the Fairly Odd Phantom short, although that was pretty much an elaborate commercial for Bunsen is a Beast, which was cancelled after 1 season, by the way. Danny also makes an appearance in Super Brawl Universe, Nickelodeon's recent fighting game, and he's B tier, by the way. Henry Danger for the win! Other significant fan-fueled efforts to give the show attention has been accounted for. The hashtag Go Ghost Again movement has gained the attention of Danny Phantom cast and crew alike, and has even been acknowledged by Nickelodeon.
I've taken a crack at my own futuristic adaptation of Danny Phantom called 5 Years Later, a crossover webcomic that's been going on for 2 years and has received positive reactions from the fandom and even Butch Hartman himself. As you can probably tell from the video, I have a pretty deep passion and understanding of the characters, and I believe that this series does Danny Phantom a special kind of justice that he didn't get to have in his 3rd season. If you are interested in checking it out, the 8th chapter has just been released, and I believe it's the best one yet. Let me know what you think. A link will be provided in the description below. Danny Phantom is a show that's kind of hard to ignore. Saying that I'd love to see what a show would have become had it not been cancelled so early is starting to sound like a broken record in the cartoon community. The amount of shows that I admire that's been done dirty is so common that it can be considered a requirement at this point. And in retrospect, I'd rather Danny have ended where it did than go on for so long that it becomes a former shell of itself. Hell, Danielle could have been the seeds of a Chloe Carmichael character if what the plans for the Fentons to adopt her in the 4th season would have happened. In a way, Danny Phantom being cancelled sealed its fate as a short but memorable story that had a lasting legacy on older and newer generations alike. The show is what it is, and now there's nothing we can do to change that. I think it's best to just look back at the show with admiration, and be thankful that we had the chance to experience as much of it as we did. The limited amount of episodes prompts us to rewatch what's there, and every time I rewatch an episode, I find a new way to appreciate it, but also sometimes new things that annoy me. It's just nice to always have a different opinion coming out of each viewing, so the show can always stay fresh.
Well, if you're looking for a show that has tons of action, a great soundtrack behind it, with neat comedy that brings you back to the mid-2000s Nickelodeon era, with tons of ghosts, remember, he's gonna catch 'em all, cause he's Danny Phantom. Thank you for watching. I'd like to thank KuroTheArtist for helping me along with this project. As you can see, it was very extensive, very long, and his help made things so much easier. And I also want to thank my editors, Leah C/Toon Ruins, and TutorPop for helping me edit this massive video. Special thanks to the patrons of August. And until next time, take care. Alpha out.